Well, thank you for being here today. Jan Peter van Voorst van Beest. Did I say it properly? Thank you. And Pius Ali. Today is yet another in the series of brown bag lunches with artists who are using their art to change the world. Here at the University of New England is the talk. They're using their work to change the world all over the place. And you have gone very far around the world with your work, and I'm excited to hear about it. Hopefully this will be a bit of a dialogue today, so please make sure you use the mic as we go along so it gets recorded for the camera. And let's just go from here. Are you ready?
Okay, yes.
Right, have fun.
All I have to do is hold this, right?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Jan Peter van Voorst van Beest. It's a long name, and about, when was it, 2007 or 2008, we did the book, and the birth of the book was actually, I'm a photographer, and I was always, and not only a photographer, I'm also an immigrant. I'm from Holland, and I've been in the States since 1970, so I've been here a long time, but lived in Portland for a long time, and there was a time that I got really intrigued with all the new influx of immigrants that came to Portland, which was mostly expressed to me and most visible in the beginning by all the ethnic restaurants that were all across Portland. So the initial idea was to really to do a book of portraits, and I wanted to do a book of black and white photography, 2 1/4, which are the square portraits of restaurant owners, ethnic restaurant owners, standing either in their kitchen or in front of their restaurant, and then
Can you hold this closer?
add a recipe to it maybe, and a short story. And I'm not a writer, I'm a photographer, so I needed, for the project, I needed to find somebody who would write it. And I had a long-time friend who lived in Yarmouth, who used to write, or who was writing at the time still for Main Times. And only the older ones may remember Main Times, but it was a magazine that we hated to see go at the time, because it was an opinion magazine, and it did a great job. And Pat Nyan was my friend, and she lived in Yarmouth. So Pat said, yeah, she wouldn't mind to do that, and so we were working it out. And I had been talking to Tilbury Press at sometimes, because I had been wanting to do books, and I had been talking to the publisher, Jennifer Bunting, at the time, and she was very approachable for as far as publishing houses go. Jennifer was a person that would pick up the phone, and you could always talk to her, and she would give you advice, but it never came to anything. And so I said, well, Pat, I know her, I have talked to Jennifer, let's go there and let's give her a pitch. And so she liked the idea, but she says a book with restaurants is really not good for business, because restaurants go out of business so quick that, so we went back, and I said, well, this is really too bad. I said, well, why don't we go back and say that we throw the restaurants and the food thing out and just do it about immigrants? I said, but before we do that, we should probably find out a little bit more about it. And so we decided to do find some immigrants, and we found a guy that was heavily involved with immigrants, and he worked for the University of Southern Maine, and that was Reza Jalali. And I met him when there was a little get-together of immigrants, I think, an African festival in Lewiston. And we ran into him. I said, well, do you want to help us find people? And he was all excited about it, and he says, yes. So we wanted to do a proof chapter at once. So we found an immigrant, and her name was she was from Cambodia, and Makara Meng, and she runs a restaurant on what's the street?
Washington Avenue.
Washington Avenue. It's a great, no, not a restaurant. She runs
a grocery store.
A grocery store. It's the store to go to. She's going to move actually in Portland. But anyways, we did a chapter and we brought it down there, and Tilbury was excited about it, and they said, yes, we're going to do it. So we had to find, in order to do the book, the idea was to make portraits of the immigrants, and they were going to be, from my perspective, photographic portraits, because that was important for me. And then Pat was going to write the portrait. And so the photographic portrait was going to be a square portrait, a 2¼ portrait, that would start each chapter. And so by looking at the portrait, the idea was that you really would learn something about the person, got an introduction to the person before you read the 3 or 4 pages of their story. And so we did that with Makara. And I went to her store and I went to her house to photograph her, and she was a lovely person. She had 2 kids, and we photographed her. Pat went down to interview her, and we brought the chapter down there. And then the next step was to get the right mix of people, because we wanted a book that was reflective of the immigrant population in Maine. So not only we decided to do 25 or 26 chapters, so that was 25 or 26 people, but they had to be, there's a certain percentage of people from Africa, there's a certain percentage of people from Europe even, and so forth. And we also wanted to be a book about the newer Mainers, not immigrants like me that had been here forever, but immigrants that had been here maybe for the last 10 or 15 years and were relatively new. So that's basically how we started out. We did the book so long ago, and I've done so many of these, but it changes all the time, and it has a little bit to do with the audience that you have. Mm-hmm. And some audiences are totally interested only in the immigrant part of it. Other audiences are also interested in the photographic part of it, and sometimes it's both. So
yeah, we're probably interested in both the mix of the art and the application within social justice and how it's had a community or state impact.
Yeah, well, I like that, and I think the goal of the book was, and in the end, and I think the significance of the book for a writer or for an author changes over time a little bit, and you look at it different. Yes.
I was going to ask you to remind me what the name of that woman whose photograph is up right now is.
Khadija Goulet. Khadija Goulet.
I think it's. I know that here at the University of New England, we gave for 3 years in a row a Purple Starfish Award.
She won one.
And she won one.
Yes.
And she was one of the most articulate and moving recipients. And we had her here on many occasions. And she helped us to continue that effort to honor the new people in our midst who are contributing so hugely to our culture.
Yeah, what I will do is I will go through the slides, and Pius here will help me. Pius was one of the subjects of the book, and at the time that I met him, he had dreadlocks, longer hair. He was not a member of the Portland School Board, which he just recently got elected to, and so he was one of the members, and he came. He was good enough to come down, and he will fill in the chapters where I forgot about the people, and he also is still in contact with more of the people in the book than I am, so he can fill in, and he can also tell his own immigrant story. But we'll quickly go through this. This was Khadija. She works for community counseling services, and specifically on the immigrant issues. And as a photograph, most of the photographs are, yes? Where does she come from? She comes from Somalia, and she was a refugee. The mix of the book was also, we had to have a mix, yes, it had to be a mix of refugees. So of the 26 people in the book, there are 11, I think, are refugees, and half of them are women. A group of them comes from Africa. We have them from Pakistan, from India, from Peru, from Mexico, and from Russia, I think. And maybe there's some more countries, but it'll come out. And from Ghana, well, Africa, you're from Africa. From Ghana. There were 3 African countries. I think there was Somalia, Ghana, and Nigeria, I believe. And Khadija came from, she was a refugee. She was a victim of the civil war in Somalia, and came here saw a lot of hardship before she came here. Went to school, went to the University of Maine, worked herself up, taught herself the language, and
She was in graduate school, I think, at one point, and also she has 4 or 5 children. She was pregnant at one point with her 4th or 5th child.
that's right. Her husband is from, I don't know if her husband from Maine, or is he from Somalia also?
I think her husband's from Somalia.
So yeah, and she went to the University of Maine, and then she went to graduate school also, I think. And at the time that we interviewed her, I don't think she may have had her master's at the time, but I don't know if she went any further than that. Photographically, most of the photos are what I call environmental portraits, where the portrait itself and the environment of the portrait will tell something about the person. When I got to her office, there was nothing but white walls in her office, and absolutely nothing that I could really tell a story about her, except her hijab and her face. And her face was so wonderful, and I finally, this is one of the few portraits where I really focused in on the person and got a lot closer, because I had no choice. Plus, her face helped a lot, and then the graphics of her hijab was just so wonderful in her hand. So it became the portrait that the publisher wanted to be on the cover, because the other portraits are a little further away, and when you put a book on a book stand, she was just closer, so that really helped a lot. Go to the next one, and this became the cover. The strip on the top of the picture is, I think it may be from Ghana.
Yeah, it's called Kente.
And we had to actually get permission from. We could not just use that without getting permission, and I think they had to purchase it. They had to pay some money for it to use it, but it worked. It worked pretty well. And and then here we have Joe Castañeda, and he was from El Salvador, and his wife is also from El Salvador, and he basically walked from El Salvador to Maine. I mean, that was quite a story. The guy always worked. He still works. Do you still have contact with him?
No.
Ali? No. But he worked mostly in fish processing plants here in the Portland area. Never got paid a lot, but his big passion was soccer. And he organized a Latin soccer league here in Portland, and they did at the time have a regular competition, and he loved it. He met his wife. His wife was a childhood friend in El Salvador. He came to Maine, obviously as an illegal immigrant, working here, and then his wife actually, while pregnant, made the same trip, swimming over rivers, across rivers in Mexico, and finally crossing the U.S. border. And I think his father paid for their tickets, like $6,000 a piece, to the people that smuggled them.
To the
through.
coyotes. Yeah. Coyotes, I think, what do they call that?
Yeah, absolutely. And the photograph, that was the hardest photograph I had to take, because I could only do it at noon in the afternoon, and the sun was just high, and I wanted him on the soccer field, and he insisted on wearing the hat. The ball was all white. It was a tough photo, but I think it came out okay. I like the photo. I'm happy with it in the end. But it was quite a story. And here is Horia Majid. Do you still see her? What? Actually, if you look, Majeed, and her first name is Horia, and she's from Afghanistan, and she was a refugee, and her husband was an artist, and I think he taught also. And of course, intellectuals with the Taliban, that didn't work very well. And at one point during her life, she found her husband dead on her doorstep. And so she finally ended up fleeing. I think she went to Pakistan and ended up in refugee camps, and ended up here in Maine.
Mm-hmm. And is she like many of the other refugees in Maine, someone who came through one of the placement services like Catholic Charities, or?
Most of the refugees come through Catholic Charities. That's
Mm-hmm.
actually the only agency in Maine that deals with refugees. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. And when I photographed her, she has a son, but this is her dress that she used for festivities in her native in Afghanistan. And I said, well, how do you want to be photographed? Because she worked in a restaurant at the time, and right now she does a lot of catering and so forth. She does a great job, I mean, doing that. And she says, well, I have a dress that I can put on for you to be photographed in. And she went upstairs, and I kid you not, she was gone for 45 minutes. And finally she comes down in this dress that is all these green and gold colors. It was just magnificent. It was beautiful. And so that the dress for me made the portrait. Plus she was also a very good looking woman, and she looks just great in that. And right now I think she's still catering. She lost her job at the restaurant at the time, I believe.
I met her recently because she was
Yeah.
catering a Maine People's Alliance meeting in Donald Sussman's office.
Uh-huh. So she's still doing well. Yeah. She's a good person. She's a good person. Irma Pete and Hermeet Kohli, they are Sikhs. They're from India. They're from New Delhi. They're both from pretty well-to-do families. They came here. They're both right now professors at the University of Southern Maine. They had a very hard time because it's very hard, if you're both a professor, to get a job at the same college. And so he was working as a professor in California. I think he's a business professor. She's a professor in social work. It was very hard. So they felt extremely.
Where they work now?
What?
Where they work now?
Where they University of Southern Maine.
Okay.
I haven't checked lately, but
She is still there.
Use the mic, please.
Yep. I've been in her class a couple of times. She teaches master's in social work at USM, and I've seen her recently. She still teaches there. I haven't met her husband.
so they are Sikhs, and of course Sikhs come from the Punjab area on the Afghanistan and Pakistan border, and but they finally came from India actually. So their family. They came from India, but their family are obviously from the Punjab area in Pakistan.
Can I ask you, as an artist and a photographer, how is this project different from other projects for you in the portraiture and the finding the full story behind the humans that you work with?
I consider myself mostly maybe a sort of a documentary / street photographer. That means I like to go out and photograph people and shoot people, and I concentrate on people a lot, and that's sort of for me slides in portraiture, because you deal with the people, and on the street you don't necessarily ask people for permission. And I've been doing a whole series in the New York subway, for example, where you would get killed if you ask people for permission to shoot. But it's exciting, and it's basically a study of the human endeavor, and that's what interests me. And sometimes when you photograph on the street, you do ask for permission because you get this eye contact. A lot of times you don't, because if you would, the shot is gone. I mean, you see something happening, and that's what you shoot. when I do portraiture, I don't ask people to smile or to do something. I usually engage them in a conversation, and I just wait till I see what I want, and then I shoot them. And with these people, this series, yeah, go ahead.
Well, and then there was the writing component to this book that you put together into the project. So when did the writing and the interviewing happen for capturing their stories for the book?
We did it separate. I would send Pat out to do the writing and to do the interview, and she had to come back and feed me information about the location. So I had a vague idea what I would run into, because most of the time you end up in people's houses. And you don't know what to expect, because the lighting is different, and it's always different. Sometimes it is in the workplace. A couple times it was outside. But inside I usually used one flashlight, off-camera flash, and worked with the natural light that would come in from windows or from curtains or from whatever. Yeah.
And then another question is around race and immigrant status. And how was it for you as a white man to have this conversation with, I believe most of your subjects are not white in this. How did your role as male, as immigrant, as white sort of factor into the artistic dialogue that happened in the creation of these portraits?
I never felt that I never had any problems with that. For me, everybody is the same. And so I feel comfortable with people no matter where they come from or what they look like or who they are or how they make their money or I mean, people are people, and I'm interested in their story, and I'm interested in what they look like photographically and what the photo is going to be. But I mean, I find it interesting, and my background was basically, I'm from Holland, where actually the weird thing was when I grew up in Holland, there were no people of color. I mean, we were very proud of the fact that we had no racism in Holland, but we didn't have racism in Holland because there were no people that looked any different from anybody else. So that was pretty easy. But then we had a lot of colonies because Holland colonized a lot of people. They were great in colonizing other countries. They were great in slavery, actually, also. Not necessarily things.
Right.
Well, that's what they did. But we had colonies, and when the colonies became independent, like Suriname, we had a lot of people from Suriname come to Holland. We had a lot of people from Indonesia come to Holland earlier, but the Indonesians didn't look that different. You know, they were lightly colored and so forth. At one point, they had a big problem. Maybe I'm straying. When Indonesia became independent, first of all, they were a colony. Then the Japanese took Indonesia away from Holland. Then the Japanese lost, and Holland went back into Indonesia to try to claim their colonies. Burned some villages, shot some people, did the usual thing that we do as colonists. And there was one area in Indonesia which was an island group, Ambon. And the Ambonese Indonesians, they looked a little different. They were more Aborigine. They had wild curly hair and not the steep hair. They were darker. But they were more on the Dutch side. So they fought with the Dutch. And when the Dutch finally gave it to Sukarno under pressure from the US, because the US didn't really want the Dutch in there anymore because Indonesia and Sukarno were anti-communistic, the Ambonese people a lot of them went to Holland. But they all went to Holland because the Dutch said, well, you know, we will get your Ambon back, which of course they were never able to do. So the people from Ambon came to Holland, lived they were giving housing, but they never accepted that. So they never really integrated. They didn't want to integrate. And so in the 75, they actually, it came to it that they hijacked a train and killed some people, and because they wanted the Dutch government to give them Ambon back, which never happened. And so we actually, and that was the first terrorism actually before we had terrorism. I saw that train. I was almost on that train actually because my sister lived in the northern part of Holland, and we went back on vacation, and that's the train that we normally took. But right now, there's 4 generations of Ambon people, and now they're finally integrating because there's no way for them to go back. So
It's amazing how these stories all tie to a political war
Oh, it
or
is.
unrest that,
Yeah.
you know, and so there's this beautiful woman in a beautiful gown, and what is also tied to her journey into being here is very
Absolutely.
much tied to a political space. Before you do another slide, Pius,
Yeah.
could you talk about being a participant in this project, and why did you say yes, and what did you think about doing it, and can you talk a little about your process in it?
Okay. For me, I had a phone call, I think, from Reza, and he said that they are capturing stories of people from immigrants in Portland. And at that time, which I still do, I was working with young people, and he said that they're capturing people who are doing different things, and they wonder if I want to share my story. So I said yes. And I don't know whether it was you or Pat who contacted me first.
Pat probably first.
Yeah. So we did. She came and she talked to me. I think then I've just went to Seas of Peace for the first time. So I shared a story of my work at Riverton Park, working with at-risk youth. Most of them are immigrants. And then the work that I did at Seas of Peace. And so he came in and took the pictures at home. And we also met at Riverton Park, and he took pictures of me working with young people. And what does it mean to me? In my story, I shared how I was raised and how being in this country, what it means to me, and also my belief in working with young people and some of the changes that possibly will happen if more people work around peace.
So did you see the art, the interview process, the portrait as an opportunity to further your vision for change in the world, or what was the opportunity for you in saying yes?
Yes, a bit of that, and also a bit of many a times you don't get people to share the story of the immigrants if it's not sensational enough. Even when the book was launched, I joke to someone that the story that was focused is the story that will get more Americans to come to the launching. It was the story of Makara. Makara have like a very tough life. She shared a story of her mom and in the camp during the war, and some of the struggles that they went through until she get to the U.S. Whereby in the book there's somebody who was a classmate of the current Syrian president. At that time, it will be. Now, I don't think anybody want to share that. But at that time, it will be very glorious to say that somebody like that lives in Portland. But the newspapers, when they were reviewing the book, after they've read all the stories, every newspaper after newspaper, TV, radio that talk about the book, all focus on the refugee and the war stories that came out of so it is always good to balance the perception of who the new menace or the new Americans are.
Yeah,
At that time, I didn't know. I saw it from that way, but later on, as I look at it, I realized that it's good that we have many different voices in the book. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Good to hear from you in there.
We have to go through them a little faster than what we have been doing because we have quite a few pictures left. So here is Makara, and she is with her 2 children, and she was the first subject in our book. She's from Cambodia, and she is a survivor of the killing fields. Actually, she was about 3 or 4 years old when she fled with her mother and ended up in a refugee camp. And she has the store on Washington Avenue, and if you ever need Thai or Indian or whatever food you need, it's a great store.
Her mom passed about 6 months ago. Yeah, her mom did pass, but she also said that she want to go home. So she was sent home when she was dying, and then she passed at home. And Makara have 3 children now. She have a girl, in addition to the 2 boys when the picture was taken. And I think he is in high school now, so, yeah, in South Portland.
Yeah. Yeah, the kids were. I had actually one of her pictures. Her mom was in it, and it was a lovely picture. But then I got this picture where the kid had his hands like that, and she had the youngest child was was born already at the time, and but yeah, I just chose this picture. I mean, so Shamu, he's from Iran. And he's a musician, and he's actually married to the director of the Bates Dance Festival. And he's a great musician, and he has a studio in Pine Street, I think, in Portland, or that's where they live. He's a very tall guy, and he had been here a little longer, I think, than most immigrants. He had been here for about 20 years or so, but. Photographically, it was easy. He had this studio with all these great percussion instruments, and so it was easily to find all the shapes and so forth. So that was interesting. Yes. Nope. Oh. Mary Otto, she was from Sudan, I believe, and she was a refugee also. And she's very much involved here with the immigrant community, at least at the time. And she is a lot of the immigrants that we photographed and that we interviewed from Africa were Muslims, but she was a Christian, I'm pretty sure. And so
with that picture in the back. And
well,
looks like is that the Pope there?
That big picture of the Pope really saved me. When I saw that, I saw, well, I have to integrate that into the photograph.
Because why?
What?
Why did you have to integrate it?
Well, what you want to do with a photograph is you want to tell a little story, and you want to tell a little bit as to who these people are. And when you make an environmental portrait, you don't want to overdo it, but there have to be small hints that sort of start telling the story, and that's what I try to do. And she worked. What all these people have in common is that everybody just came to the United States and they all worked like mad. They worked and worked. I mean, that if there is one false stigma sometimes that immigrants carry is that they're lazy and they don't want to work and they just want to receive benefits. Well, first of all, in the U.S., they don't receive a lot of benefits because after 6 months, I think, they're basically being cut off and they're on their own,
Right.
more or less.
More or less.
Yeah.
And also, the benefit that is given, if you are given money, when you started working, you have to pay back. If you are a refugee or an asylee, refugees not so much, you get up to a certain point and then you start working. If you are an asylee, before you get your authorization which allow you to work, you will be given help by the state, and then it's a federal grant money, and then once you get your papers and you start working, they give you up to a certain amount of time where you cannot, your benefit is cut. And when you get job, I think at the end of the year when you get your taxes, some of it will be taken off. If there's something called workfare, whilst you are receiving the money, you have to do 40 hours of work for the city to pay back. I don't know how they calculate the amount of work that you have to do to equate the amount of help that you get, but you pay it back. And if you don't finish paying and you get a job, if it's a lot of money, at the end of the year when you get your taxes, they take it out. So you will end up paying some of the help that is giving you.
Gerard Caladian, he is currently the manager of the Portland Harbor Hotel, and he's from Syria, although his ancestry is from Armenia, and he identifies with the Armenians more than with the Syrians, although he grew up in Syria. And so his wife was an Egyptian Armenian, and they met in Canada, I think. So actually from Syria, he went to Canada, and then from Canada he came to the United States. He was not a refugee. He came here he went to hotel school, I think, and he became involved in hotel management, and he was very successful in doing that. One little interesting story is when we interviewed him being from Syria, he actually went to school with the current Assad, to middle school. And I can just quote you a little bit. Can you hang on to this for a minute? Because it is maybe not funny, but it is significant. What he was saying at the time about Assad. I got it. Yeah. I was a classmate of Bashar al-Assad all throughout middle and high school. They were a good family. Bashar was very honest, straightforward kid. He was well disciplined. Kaladian recalls. Bashar assumed the presidency on the death of his father in 2000, although his older brother would have succeeded to the post if he had not died in a car crash. Having known both brothers, Kiladian believes Bashar was the better choice. His brother would have been tougher politically versus Bashar, who is more easygoing and open-minded. Isn't that something? I mean, I think he made a remark to Ali, to Pius, not so long ago, that something that he doesn't understand how much Assad had changed in the last couple of years.
It's an example of the fact that power does corrupt.
Oh, yes. Grace Valenzuela, some of you might be familiar with her. She's from the Philippines. Yeah, right. And
She's a Deborah Morton awardee.
yeah. Oh, she's brilliant. I mean, she runs all the second language things for the Portland School, for the Portland School Department, and it was lovely to photograph her. She went to change. She was dressed very nicely when I came there, but she says, "Oh no, I have to change for this photograph." And fortunately, also in this photograph, she had this portrait of Frida Kahlo in the background, which always, those little things always help, you know. But she's a wonderful person, and she does great work, and she talks a lot on the immigrant issue and so forth in the area. Oscar Mokimi, he's the founder and owner of the African Museum on, what's the street, the side street of Congress Street
Brown.
there? Yeah, and it's a lovely little museum. Oscar is really I liked him a lot when he's from Nigeria. I don't know how long ago he came here, but he's been here quite a while.
For a long time.
Yeah, at the time when I talked to him, he still annually he took people on trips to Nigeria actually, which should be pretty interesting. His portrait again was, I thought it was interesting to photograph him in front of that mask because he has sort of the same grin as the thing in the mask. And
He's a tribal chief from a tribe with a lot of leaders in Nigeria,
Yeah.
and he has a lot of masks too.
Oh, it's a wonderful museum, yeah. Kim and Van Loo, that's an interesting story there, Vietnamese. He is an Amerasian. That means that his father was an unknown American soldier. And her brother was an Amerasian. And the Amerasians in Vietnam were terribly discriminated against at one point, so much so that the American government gave Amerasians refugee status. So they both met. They met in a refugee camp, actually, the two of them, before they came to the United States. And they operate a flooring. They do floors. If you have wooden floors and you want them redone, they are the people, and they're just lovely people. And it's a nice couple. They have two kids, I think, at the time, and she does the business. You call them for a job. She will answer the phone and direct you. He's very shy, but they invited me in. He gave me a couple of beers. They got some food out, and it was just lovely. And I was happy with the photograph. And the way that she holds his arm is there's really a sense of love there, I think.
So we have a few more minutes is here, and I'd
Yeah.
love to hear a few more of the stories. But before we run out of time, can you talk about you as an artist and your thoughts on how this book has either changed you and your perception of the world, or how your work has had an impact on people here in Maine? Just our focus here at the School of Social Work is on applied arts and social justice, and if you could just reflect on that for a
Okay.
moment, it'd be great.
Both, yeah. Well, for me, myself, I feel very privileged that I had the opportunity to photograph all these people and work and meet all these people and work with them. I mean, I'm an immigrant myself, but to see and to hear the stories that you hear also, although they're very different, because my immigrant story was easy. I came here because I fell in love with a woman and she was American, so it was all rather easy for me. And plus I spoke the language, and I came from, when you're born in Western Europe, when you're born in the US, we don't realize how privileged we are. I mean, we have it easy compared to some of these people that came here through all kinds of hardship and refugee camps, and so that way it makes you realize how lucky you are. And the book, I think the purpose of the book ended up to be to create a little bit of understanding what refugees are all about, who these people are, and what they go through to get here and to make a life for themselves. And I think or not only refugees, but immigrants overall they're good for America. I mean, especially here. I mean, the States was a country that was built on immigrants and by immigrants, and it is about immigration. And I think what we don't realize sometimes is when you see a lot of influx of a lot of people that you're not familiar with, that you have to get over that, and that is a blessing that they're here. And I think that's basically what it taught me.
Can you reflect on that, Pius, before we go to another story?
I think it's for me, the book, it's an opportunity for, like I said earlier, for the immigrant story, the many different immigrants. But there's one piece that is hidden in it. There's a woman from Nigeria whose husband was a lawyer. She was in school here when you photograph her. Her husband is a Muslim. He had a job traveling to as a lawyer for UN, and he traveled. He had British citizenship. They both had British citizenship and Nigerian citizenship. And I think he went to Afghanistan to work for the UN. And when he was coming back, he had confrontation with the British government and the US government, and they were kicked out. So he will not be able to come back here. And his wife's beautiful story is here. So that is another, I'm sure that might touch the social justice part of your question.
But she went, and I'll go through the pictures in a little bit of a hurry so we can do it. But she actually, and I like that, she got educated here. She was one of the first women that would go walking through Portland wearing a hijab before anybody else did it, actually. And she was quite a striking woman, and I'll show you a picture. But she went back, I think, to where she came from with that knowledge that she gained here to actually make her own country better. And I think that would be the ideal solution for immigration. I mean, if all the Mexicans, and I'm not saying that all the Mexicans should go back to Mexico, but if all that knowledge that they can get here, privilege, they go back to Mexico and build Mexico up, then there is that need to go somewhere else to get economically, to better yourself economically, is gone. And that would be an ideal work. I'm not saying that people should move around. I think people should move around, but that would be nice. That is Zeynep Turk. She's from Turkey, as her name says, and she is. She works for the main the trade center, and she came here out of herself. She went to USM, and she became very successful. Very, very nice person. Emrus Sikiri from Albania, it's Kosovo actually, and he saw the whole war in Kosovo, came here with his family, saw some of his family members killed by the Serbs at the time. He has 2 daughters that actually danced for us at one of these events that we had at the Lewiston Library at one time. And he's a musician. He worked at W.H. Nichols at the time. When I photographed him, he lived on Washington Avenue, I believe, and I had an appointment with him in the morning at 9 in the morning at his house. Came to his house, didn't get an answer. He didn't open the door. He wasn't there. The day before, Kosovo had their independence, and he went to Boston and to celebrate it with some Kosovarians. So he was sound asleep and never answered the door. The great thing about what I liked about the picture is he had these big 2 flags, because he was very grateful to the U.S. because the U.S. wanted a free Kosovo, independent Kosovo all the time, and then he had the Albanian flag in his living room. So I mean, for a photographer with the instrument, I made him play his violin. It was just made for a pretty nice composition, I thought. Anyway, Rifat and Tashmin Zaidi, they are both doctors. They live in up north. What is it? North of. No, a little south of. What's in the book? Anyway, he's on TV sometimes in an ad for Mid-Coastal thing. He's a orthopedic surgeon. She was a doctor also before she came here. They're from Pakistan. He goes back to Pakistan, at least at the time, once a year with supplies for the earthquake victims, and they do a lot of good work in Pakistan. She's not a doctor anymore now, but she imports clothes and products from Pakistan, which she sells in the thing. Very nice people. The picture, they came, and quite a few people in the book have an arranged marriage. And they had an arranged marriage, actually, but it's a very happy marriage. But he's really the boss in this family. And I think by positioning her the way I did, really shows that he is the voice in the family, actually. She gave up her medicine, and he still practices. But they're wonderful people. Winston Williams, he was the foreman on Beth's farm. He's a seasonal worker. He's from Jamaica. He lives here about 9 months out of the year for the farm. He leads a Jamaican farm crew at Beth. Are you familiar with Beth Farm?
Yes.
In Damarisco, no, not Damarisco, in
Wa-
Warren.
Yeah, Warren.
Yeah, it's a wonderful farm, and this guy was just amazing. And I love the composition of this photograph because it reminded me of Brian. I mean of the old classic photographs. That I could actually put him in he had his trailer that he could just sit in. It was nice. Was a very good guy, also a very hard worker. You know, can you imagine being gone for 9 months out of the year and then go back, you know, talking to your wife on the telephone. Anyway, Suwana, and her last name is so long that I can't pronounce it, but she owns the restaurant on Forest Avenue, the Thai restaurant, and she owns another restaurant Congress Street, I think. Yeah, she makes the greatest dumplings in Portland, and she has an interesting story. But yeah, so here, Rafael Galvez, he was an immigration lawyer from Peru. He came here, got his law degree at the University of Southern Maine before he had a green card. Then he had his law degree, and he couldn't practice because he didn't have a green card. So then he had to get his green card. So he had to put all his knowledge as a lawyer to work to finally get a green card. Pius says that he moved to New York.
A few years ago, he lives in New York
Jaden Lee. She was a student in. She was with Cambodia. Yeah. She was a student. She was a refugee. Her parents were refugees, and her parents had a very hard time in the United States. They were hard times all the time. They were in California. They were in Massachusetts. She lived here. I think she may have lived here with her mother. She didn't want to talk about any of that very much. She was homeless at one point. She got herself through school at University of Maine, and her ideal was to become a lawyer. So I photographed her in front of the law school. That was really was.
Has she become a lawyer?
Probably.
Yeah. Great.
Now, see, he still had dreadlocks at the time, and you want to talk a little bit about where are
About
we?
my dreadlocks.
We have just a couple of minutes.
Couple minutes. Well, he was a photographer in Ghana before he came here,
Yeah.
You were.
and he's not a refugee, but you basically came here to try to better yourself.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's
and-
economic refugee.
And let me talk to this. He when I saw him work with these kids at the center where you were, I thought you were amazing. The way they listened to him and the way they did as he told them, and you could tell that these kids really cared about him, and he cared about the kids. But he was tough, and he would tell you, go do this, and you go do that, and no nonsense. And it was absolutely amazing. And now, about a couple months ago, he was elected to the Portland School Board. And I think that was great. These are two Jewish Russian women that came here, and they came here because they felt they were being prosecuted in Russia because of being Jewish, which they were. And the older lady was an engineer in Russia, and the younger lady was a accountant. And she's still an accountant now. The older, that's her mother-in-law, actually, because the younger woman, Lana's husband died, I believe, and so they live pretty close together. And her mother didn't really want to be photographed. She was very shy, and I had to make her a lot of compliments before she finally posed for me. But they were lovely people. They live in South Portland. That's Tomas, and Tomas is the squash coach at Bowdoin College, and he was a professional squash player for a long time. He grew up in Mexico City. Went on the international squash thing, went to school in New York, Fordson College. Came from a pretty well-to-do family, but became a hell of a squash player. And finally he married a woman, Mary Lou from Mexico, who's also a squash player. And he had... Now finally he got a call from Bowdoin College because he had applied at one time, and he was rejected because they got somebody else. Then the other guy left after 2 years, and he got the call, and they went to Brunswick, and they love it. And he's a nice guy, and he's a great squash. I play squash there, and so he's very good. And yeah. Ismail, he was very active in the immigrant movement in Lewiston at the time. Specifically, he came here right before the mayor of Lewiston made his comments that he didn't really want that many immigrants anymore. And so Ismail got very involved in that whole situation at the time. And what he did, he started a company where he actually finds jobs for immigrants. His company helps immigrants find jobs, basically. And
Somali?
yeah, Somali. I'm sorry. Yeah. And he moved away from the area.
He lives in DC now.
Yeah.
DC now.
Yeah, very smart guy. And here is Jalila Doyetundi, and that's she's from Nigeria, and that's the person that Pius was talking about with her husband. She was basically, she saw herself as a scholar. She loved to study. And so her husband wasn't there when I photographed her, and she was very religious at the time. And so I couldn't photograph her at her home because her husband wasn't there. And so, but she felt very much in tune as being photographed at USM in the library, which made it a very difficult photograph because the light is coming back. But I love the books, and she loved the books, and I love her hands, actually. And but the counter light is tough, so I had to really use a lot of fill-in light for her for her face. But
Beautiful.
and her scarf was actually, the color actually was pretty nice too, but the black and white worked out pretty good. And then here's Laura Vel. She's from Romania, and then she was born and raised in Romania. Then she went to Israel. She's Jewish, and then she grew up in Israel mostly. And then she married and went to Massachusetts. Came to Massachusetts, worked there as a librarian, I think. And then she came to Portland and became a movie maker, and started doing video and so forth after she went to the workshops, I believe. And when I met her, she's still around, and she runs a company where she connects youth with media or something like that.
She's been here in the UNE Art Gallery many times.
Digital storytelling is pretty amazing, a cultural exchange through digital works.
Yeah. She's a good person, smart person. Timo Luck, he's an engineer for Fairchild Semiconductor. He's from Hong Kong, Chinese. He did very well in the United States. The last thing I heard, that he was sick, I think, but that's a while ago. I haven't heard from him for a while. He had a very funny story, actually. He has this big house in Falmouth Forsyth, and he has some patents on his name. He did very well. He's a director for Fairchild. And at one point, his mother lived with him, but also his wife's mom lived with him. And his mother was from Singapore, and he was from Hong Kong. His mother was from China, actually. And he says, well, they get along fine because they don't speak each other's language. So they
We actually have folks coming into the gallery now, so we should probably wrap this here.
That's the last
Is
one.
that your last one?
Yeah,
finish
so-
him. Go ahead.
Well, it was Reza, and he helped us a lot with the book, and he helped us find subjects for the book and so forth. And I have to finish with saying, really, that Pat Nyan did a terrific job reading the book. By the way, I have some books if anybody wants to buy one.
I wanted to say that Reza Jalali is a Kurd from Iran.
Yes, he is.
And he's been here for a long time and has played a wonderful role with to welcome our new Mainers.
Yeah.
And I think what you've offered us here today is an amazing catalog, if you will, of folks who are here, have found roots in Maine, and have brought to Maine a richness that we wouldn't have. And I feel like that sharing of experience and story has been captured with your photographs and with Pat's words. And we're quite lucky to expand our vision of what does immigrant in Maine mean. So, beautiful bridge. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you very